Climb aboard the NFL Express with Charles Barr and John Chapman, your one stop for all 32 NFL teams and news from around the league.
Choo-choo! NFL Express, we're back in the house with John Chapman and a special guest today, Shaw. What's up, Shaw?
Nothing much. How about you?
Doing pretty good. You're in a different time zone than me, but you're in the same time zone as John. So
California representing.
Yes, sir.
2-1. Weirdly enough, though, Shaw is his team that he likes is on the complete opposite side of the United States. Could you tell us who your favorite team is?
The greatest team in the NFL, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Oh, the Yankees? Oh, the Steelers. Okay. And so today we're going to be focused on the AFC North, and we're going to kind of get right back into what we've been doing the past few podcasts, and we're going to be ranking each position group within that division. And again, we got John Chapman with us and Shaw, who is like my first cousin, second removed cousin from the fifth cousin. But anyways, he's on the podcast today, and we're pumped to have him. So you guys ready to get into this business?
Let's do it, man.
Yeah, let's do it.
Before we start, John, I'm just going to give you a free pass in. Is there any NFL news, just like maybe one thing that's just like sticking out to you right now? Big news, everything's kind of, training camps are starting.
Yeah, training camps are getting started for all teams this week. Everybody will be reported by Sunday and Monday. But, man, Mike Daniels, defensive tackle for the Packers, who's been absolutely incredible, was surprisingly released today. His personality is hilarious. If you're keeping up with the NFL 100, he's always on there, from Jersey, and just loves to talk trash on the field and off the field. But he is definitely he didn't have a great year last year, but he is going to sign with a prominent playoff team. So look for that, because he can give you starter quality snaps from the interior defensive line position. So that's one of the ones that's a little underwhelming, just because it's not a skill position, but that dude's a baller.
He's a baller, and he's been featured a ton on the top 100 the past two episodes. So, and by the way, all three of us have watched All or Nothing, I believe, the Carolina Panthers.
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, so we should touch on that in a little bit too. But first up, let's get to the offensive side of the ball for the AFC North. So we're talking Ravens, Steelers, Browns, and Bengals. And you got to start with the most important position in football, kicking. No, we're not doing kicking. We're going to start with quarterback. So, Shaw?
I thought that was a Kareem Hunt reference.
Yeah. Oh, nice. So, we're going to start with you. I'm going to let you choose. Which do you want to rank first, the worst quarterback or the best quarterback in the division?
All right, I'll start from the worst. I'll start from the bottom.
Okay.
So, at fourth, I have the Bengals. Really, it's pretty gross. Andy Dalton, he used to be like the definition of mediocrity. He is not that anymore. He's actually below mediocre. Last season, he wasn't very good. And really, in the draft, they didn't do much. They picked up Ryan Finley from NC State, who I think is actually going to be pretty solid. Solid backup in the NFL, but nothing special. Andy Dalton, I think next year he won't be the starter for the Bengals or any team, really.
Yeah, and you know what? Two things about that. Number one, he's a redhead, so in any type of player profile and progression, they should have known that. His ceiling is capped off just due to that. And Zach Taylor, right, he's the head coach there now, so they're thinking that he's going to be somehow push Andy Dalton. I actually will see your next year, and I'll raise you to, I think that he actually is not the starter by week 8 this year.
Man, who would you put in there? If he's
I think they're going to look for anybody. I think that they're going to start to look outside of Dalton, just because here's the deal. They're going to be one of the least competitive teams in football. I would say they're not bottom 3, but they're kind of like bottom 5, bottom 10, somewhere in there. So, yeah. So, John, he goes and puts Dalton at the bottom. I think we're all in consensus about that.
I agree. And one thing that I do want to say is I want to try our hardest. We've done this. We've been kind of bad at this in the past, going through divisions. I want to rank the entire position group instead of just the top corner. So I do think that Andy Dalton's at the bottom for sure. I do think that this entire position group for the Bengals is at the bottom. Ryan Finley will probably be the number 2. once we get into the regular season, NC State quarterback. But it's rough. And like you said, Dalton signed for 2 more years, but they can walk away with zero dead money any chance they want.
Yeah.
So the Bengals, they're going to be at the bottom big time. Now is where it gets rough, because if we look at the other 3 teams, how do we measure this? Obviously, Ben Roethlisberger, Super Bowl winning quarterback. He's been at the top of the list for a long time. But do you take him over the young stud Baker Mayfield? And then Lamar Jackson's kind of a wild card that you could keep in there. But, I'll go to you, Shaw, because this is your team.
Are we going who's number 1?
No.
Yeah.
I think we're going to number 3, right? Because Shaw started at the bottom at 4.
Let's go number 3.
Number 3.
Number 3.
Yeah.
I have the Ravens there.
Agreed.
Is that consensus?
Yes, big time.
That's consensus, and let's go ahead and just take it to that 1 and that 2 spot and see if you're a homer for the Steelers or if you can be unbiased. Let's see what happens.
I'm a homer all the way. Steelers number 1. Then I have the Browns number 2.
Oh, man. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put some pushback on that. Here's my issue with Roethlisberger. It is home and away differential. It's pretty big. I also have concerns about his age and his injuries and those things. Now, at home, with Juju Smith and Washington and a few of those other guys, sure. But he did lose AB. And one of the things that people are saying, people are forgetting about AB, is a lot of NFL players say he's actually the best player I've ever seen in my life play. Like, ever. And so I think that that's going to make a difference for the Steelers. And then you look on the other side to the other team with probably just one of the deepest teams right now in the NFL. And because it's the Browns, people don't want to say that. But that wide receiving core is stupid. And they got a great tight end there as well. So I'm taking Baker at 1, Roethlisberger at 2. John, what say you?
Here's my thing. This is an interesting division when you look at quarterbacks and the fact that, man, they just sling the ball all over the place. Baker Mayfield had 14 interceptions, which is 3rd in the NFL, and he didn't even play the entire season. And then you look at Ben Roethlisberger, he led the entire NFL in interceptions. And so, yeah, there's huge plays, passing yards. Roethlisberger threw for over 5,000 yards, but he's so dangerous with the ball. I do hate everything about Baker Mayfield. I can't stand the guy, but I love rooting for him when he's playing. I just hate him off the field unless the police are chasing him. That's a fun video if you haven't seen that one. But yeah, I'm gonna go Steelers number 1, Browns 2. But I think whoever can limit the mistakes will win the division. It's gonna come down between these top 3 teams: Ravens, Browns, Steelers. But whoever can limit their mistakes and turnovers, because all 3 are huge turnover-prone quarterbacks, whether Roethlisberger's been around forever, or Lamar or Baker, who are relatively new.
Sure. And, John, you are keeping score, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So we've got Steelers 1, Browns 2, Ravens 3, and the Bengals last place.
Yeah. And I'll just say one more thing about why I'm okay with the Steelers being at 1, because I actually have somewhat of hope for Mason Rudolph. I just do. Don't ask me why. And Joshua Dobbs is no slouch either. I like to see what they do with him in terms of progression.
I'm curious to see who's going to be the number 2 during preseason. That's going to be very telling.
Yeah. Next is a very interesting position group. And, Shaw, this time we're going to start at the top. We're going to go to running backs. Who do you like as the best running back position group in the AFC North?
Okay, this was a really hard group to pick. All of these teams have actually pretty good running back rooms. I think they're all 4. I don't know if they're all 4 interchangeable ranking-wise, but it's really close. 1, I have the Ravens, actually.
You have the Ravens at 1?
Yeah.
Okay, talk me through this, because I had them 4, so this is good. This is
all
good.
right.
Me too.
Really, I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's really close. But Ravens, I also have, based on 1, schematically. The team is made for the run. I think Mark Ingram's actually, I think he was a bit overpaid for being old, but I think he's actually fits their scheme really well. Gus Edwards, solid running back. And Justice Hill, I really like the pick. I really liked his film. I think he's going to be actually a really good complement to Mark Ingram and Gus Edwards.
So,
Disagree.
And Kenneth Dixon is there as well. So they've got some. I think what the argument, the premise is that the opportunity fits the talent and the style of talent, and we're gonna have to fight that one through. Okay, so you have the Ravens at 1. John disagrees with that. We'll kind of go through. Let's see who you have at number 2. Shaw.
I have the Steelers at number 2. I think that's consensus number 2.
I don't know.
I don't think so, man.
No.
Ooh.
I don't think so.
All right, hold on. Let's do
Our
this.
rankings are inverse so far.
Let me. You know what? Here's the deal. I'm gonna lay my cards on the table, okay? And then John, you lay your cards on the table, and we'll just go from there, okay? Here's my cards. I have the Browns at 1. I have the Bengals at 2, Steelers at 3, Ravens at 4.
Samesies.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think here's the thing. We look at the total group. If we start with the Browns, who I have number 1, Nick Chubb is unbelievable. You look at Pro Football Focus numbers, which however you want to see that, he was the number 1 rated running back last year according to their stats. And then Duke Johnson is an elite third down running back. And then, Kareem Hunt coming back, after 8 weeks. So the depth there is legit with those 3 guys. They would start for the majority of teams in the NFL. But whenever you look at and this is the main difference I have with Pittsburgh. I put James Conner probably the number 1 overall running back out of this division.
Yeah.
But I'm not sold on the depth. I like Jalen Samuels. He's kind of a do-it-all guy. Benny Snell, I get it. But whenever you look at them versus the Bengals I think get notched up for me because their depth is the highest of the division. They go out and they get Rodney Anderson and Travion Williams in the draft this year, and they already have Joe Mixon and Giovanni Bernard. So depth-wise, I put the Bengals at the top of the list, but I prefer Chubb to Joe Mixon. So that's kind of what etches it out to me. But I do think this is just a loaded position group. You talk about the AFC North, you could say perhaps some of the best running back groups in the entire NFL. It's going to be a running division. They always play tough defense, run the ball a lot, and high-scoring offense. It's just going to be fun, man. I love this division.
In fairness to Shaw, he doesn't know our previous thing is more about talent versus also scheme as well.
And being right.
And I understand too, what he's saying, that these guys could thrive better in this system. But Shaw, if you could you finish out your ranking? So you had Ravens 1, Steelers 2. Who'd you have at 3?
I actually have the Bengals 3.
At 3, and
This
have
is also
the
because
Browns last.
Yeah. Also, I love Joe Mixon. Actually, I'm a huge Joe Mixon fan. I don't think you can say that out loud on the internet, but really,
that's a rough statement.
I think he's one of the best fantasy players you can draft.
Yeah.
But the reason I actually had the Bengals first, just based on my love of Joe Mixon, but really, I was looking at the depth. I love Travion Williams, Rodney Anderson, but Gio Bernard, I don't think is NFL caliber. He's an all right third down back, but if Joe Mixon goes down, it's some trouble right there.
I can agree with that. Yeah.
I actually had Nick Chubb. I think he's the best running back in the division, although it's close. Because Nick Chubb, last year, Hugh Jackson really disliked him and wouldn't let him get many carries early in the season.
Yeah. Hugh Jackson hates everybody.
But with Freddie Kitchens and Nick Chubb, a healthy Nick Chubb, I think it's going to be an exciting group.
So are you okay putting... So here's how we're going to break ties. Anytime 2 people agree, that's going to be it. If all 3 disagree, then Shaw gets the tiebreaker because he's the guest. Will be nice.
That sounds good.
That sounds good.
Because Chuck and I agreed on 1 through 4, our running back rankings are going to go number 1 Browns, 2 Bengals, 3 Steelers, and 4 Ravens. But again, solid group. The Ravens running backs would lead probably 4 other divisions. They'd be number 1.
So, just changing that criteria up a little bit, where we could be on the same page-ish. All right, so moving on to the next position group, which is a combo of wide receiver and tight end. I'm going to start us out, and I'm just going to say the Ravens are a clear consensus 4 here. They are the worst wide receiver and tight end, and then there's a really large gap between 3, 2, and 1. Do we agree?
I agree with you. I do think that the Ravens tight ends are very, very good. I like Mark Andrews. I love Hayden Hurst. Then you still got Nick Boyle there. So I think that their depth at tight end is great. But that does not make up for the fact that they have 2 rookie tight end, or wide receivers that are going to be their number 1 and 2. You know, they go out and spend a first-round pick. They get the first wide receiver, Marquise Brown. Health is a concern. Later on, they get Miles Boykin, who's another kind of athletic freak. If you kept up with the draft, you know, you had DK Metcalf that was like the athletic specimen. Miles Boykin actually did almost as well, if not better, in almost every category besides the 40. He actually had the number 1 catch radius if you combine height, wingspan, and vertical out of the entire draft. So they have some young talent there. I mean, if you look at their roster, they have 15 wide receivers on their active roster right now. Like, it is a dart throw approach. Who's going to catch on? But not a lot of depth there. So, I mean, even though there's a lot of guys, most of these guys, if they were cut, would not be picked up by anybody else.
You know what? Just as a slight digression, looking through some of the rosters this summer, I don't understand some of these teams with roster construction, how low of a position group they'll keep or how high. 15 wide receivers? I mean, my God. All right, sorry. All right, so our consensus 4 is the Ravens. John, this time I'm going to pass it to you. I'm going to let you take over at 3, and then Shaw, you're going to take over for who's 2 and 1.
Okay, so 3 was pretty clear cut for me, which is crazy because they've been number 1 in the entire NFL for a while. And that's going to be the Steelers. I absolutely love everything about Juju Smith-Schuster on and off the field. He's just hilarious. I love him. I love the way he plays. But outside of him, you know, there's 3 to 4 guys that are fighting for a spot. You know, James Washington, Deontay Johnson, a rookie that they have over there, and Dante Moncrief. I think Moncrief will win the number 2 job to start the year. But I think it will be James Washington's long term. I love his ceiling and the deep ball, which if you're wanting to replace Antonio Brown, which is hard to do, I think James Washington's going to be that guy eventually. But again, outside of Juju, there's not like a clear-cut stud. You could talk about Vance McDonald, but I'm a 49ers fan. I've seen him drop so many damn passes. The most frustrating tight end to watch ever. But if he can catch the ball, he's legit. But I'm putting the Steelers 3rd. Shaw, do you agree, or did I piss you off?
I actually disagree, but I can see your reasoning. I had the Bengals 3rd.
Okay,
so AJ Green, he's coming back from injury. Same with Tyler Eifert. And Tyler Eifert is a glass man. He's broken a lot, but when he is healthy, he's actually really good. But also, I can understand why you put the Bengals 2nd, because Tyler Boyd, that guy is a great football player. And also, John Ross is still on the team, and I actually really liked John Ross's film coming out of Washington, also because I watch a lot of Pac-12 ball. And under a new head coach, because Marvin Lewis really hated John Ross. I remember in a post-game interview, he threw him under the bus for dropping a pass or something. But under Zach Taylor, I think John Ross can actually progress.
All right, so, Chuck, you got to break the tie, man.
All right, I'm actually thinking this through. I'm actually going to side with Shaw here. I'm actually going to son of a bee. I actually will put the Bengals 3, the Steelers 2, and here's why. It is the tight end position that will move it over for me. Ooh. Yes, AJ Green. Yes, Tyler Boyd. So I get that. But the overall depth of when you factor in wide receiver and tight end together, I would take that Steelers group, because I think that right now Juju is the best wide receiver out of that group. If you were to compare those wide receiver groups, I'm taking Juju over AJ right now after injury and just where he is in his career. Some people would disagree with that, but overall speed and just where athleticism, where this guy is at, I'm taking him. I like James Washington a little bit more than you do too. and I don't think Moncrief beats him out. So I've got the Steelers at 2, and then, guys, is there any argument?
No.
OBJ, Landry. Don't sleep on Higgins. Tight end. I don't even try to pronounce his name. Njoku.
David Njoku.
Okay. And 2. I won't even go through the rest of the. There's actual more players besides that you're just like, Jesus. So let's go ahead and move on to our last position group. And
on offense.
So on offense, for O-line, John did all this like crazy back work. So I'm going to let John start us off, take us 1 through 4, and then Shaw, I'm going to give you a last word if you have any disagreements.
It's really interesting because the Browns' offensive line was awesome. It was really, really good. And then they went and traded the number 1 run blocking guard in the NFL, to get a pass rushing linebacker. So they took a huge downturn. Now the Steelers, they're number 1 in this group. I don't think it's even close. I have them ranked as the number 8 overall offensive line in the NFL, and you could even move them higher. With Marquise Pouncey and David DeCastro, maybe one of the best center guard combos in the NFL, and you add to that Villanueva at left tackle, like that's a stud group. There's a lot of good offensive lines, but that one is special for sure. Do you disagree with that, Shaw, having Steelers 1?
No, I had the same one, yeah.
Okay. Next up, I have the Ravens at number 2, my number 12 overall offensive line. And, they go out, they get Ben Powers. They draft him out of Oklahoma, who I like a lot. But there's a lot of draft capital here. They had Orlando Brown in the second round last year. He started as a rookie. Marshall Yanda, you could argue, is one of the best guards this decade. And Ronnie Stanley, of course, the finesse left tackle. So very solid group. Shaw talked about earlier how they have an identity and they have built this team to run the football. And that starts up front. They are completely packed up there, and they're not going to have a hard time moving the ball with this offense and that quarterback. So, Chuck, Shaw, you guys disagree at all?
No, I have the Ravens second too. And touching on Orlando Brown, I remember that draft pick. Everyone laughed at the Ravens because taking a guy who didn't even try in his 40 and his combine was pretty bad. But he turns out and starts his rookie year. That is, I got to say, Orlando Brown did pretty decent too. So props to him.
Some people just have that talent. Like, he was a guy that almost didn't finish his 40. Like, he almost quit halfway through the 40. I think he had like 10 bench press reps, even though he was 330 or 40 pounds.
Yeah.
Like, just weak, not fast, didn't care, came in out of shape, but he's just a football player. He cost himself millions of dollars by not working out. That's what it is. But you take it. It's what it is. And number 3 in offensive line rankings, I have the Browns. Like I said, they should have been higher, but they are banking on Austin Corbett, who they got out of Nevada the previous year, taking over that right guard spot when Kevin Zeitler left. So we'll have to see what happens there. Greg Robinson at left tackle, that's not exciting. He's failed a lot, but they seem to like him there. But there are some guys, Treader at center and Joe Bitonio at left guard. They have a decent interior, and it seems to work. They've got almost everybody returning last year, just losing that right guard spot. So I have the Browns at 3. Shaw?
I also had the Browns at 3, and
Look at us.
It was really hard for me to decide the Ravens or the Browns at 2 and 3, but I went with the Ravens at 2 because the Browns, they have some pretty weak tackles. Greg Robinson's bad. Chris Hubbard was actually on the Steelers. He was actually our backup tackle for really, I want to say 3 years. And he did good, but, I mean, he's low-end NFL starter, but the Ravens just have better tackles.
Yep. I'm with you there, man. And last place, rounding out, and, man, probably the biggest injury news so far this offseason, which offseason's technically over now, but the Bengals. I have them number 26th overall, and that was with Jonah Williams starting at rookie. I would bump them down to around 29 without him there because their entire plan this offseason was We're going to take Cordy Glenn, who's a little bit older and has struggled at left tackle as he's gotten older, and we're going to bump him inside to left guard. We'll put Jonah Williams, rookie, who I was very, very high on at left tackle out of Alabama. He tears his ACL, so he's done. So now they're bumping Cordy Glenn back. They drafted Billy Price last year, center out of Ohio State. He had an awful year, but huge potential guy. So a lot of question marks. They're going to have to figure something out. The Bengals are kind of rough, though. I mean, if we look right now through 4 position groups, we have them 4th, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. That's not going to cut it.
Nope. So I agree with all of those rankings. The one thing I would say as we transition to the defensive side of the ball, there's some pretty okay defensive lines here. Nothing blows me away though. And I'm gonna go ahead and start. I'm gonna pass the ball to myself. Terrell Owens this thing. I'm gonna start with the number 1 defensive line in my opinion, and then see if you guys agree or disagree. I'm taking the Browns overall number 1 defensive line. Is that consensus? Yes or no?
I agree with that.
Yes. Oh, I don't think it's close.
Yeah, it's a pretty big drop-off. They've even gone on and signed some depth behind their starters, which is what it's all about. I think a lot of times, because like you said, John, we haven't always done a good job of looking at the complete roster, just at the starters. But if you go and look at some of the players behind some of the starters, they got some players. So at number 2, and this could be contentious, so let's see. I got the Bengals at number 2 for defensive line.
I agree with that. Yeah,
their interior is pretty damn stout.
Yes.
It's kind of hard to go against that. Now, I will say this. It's a little bit interesting because we got the whole 3-4 versus 4-3 in this division taking place. So where do we put TJ Watt? Because this is going to affect the next 2 position groups. He does it all. Sometimes he even lines up in the secondary.
I put him at linebacker when I made my judgment.
Yeah, I did too.
Okay, cool. All right. So if that's the case, then 100% yes. Bengals, I would put at 2.
And, all right, not trying to make anybody mad here, but I have the Ravens at 3. Agree or disagree?
I disagree there.
Disagree, heavily.
Yeah, I have the Ravens last as well.
Okay.
Take it away, Shaw.
Yeah, take it away, Shaw. Why are the Steelers the 3rd here?
All right. Really, both of these groups aren't too exciting. But the Steelers, they have Cameron Hayward, who I think is one of the most underrated players in the league. No bias at all, but I do.
Agree.
He showed up on the NFL 100 list last night.
Yeah. Outside of Cameron Hayward, they have Javon Hargrave and Stephon Tuitt, who are okay NFL caliber guys. But the Ravens, they have Brandon Williams, who I like. But outside of Brandon Williams, it gets kind of gross. They have Pernell McPhee, who had actually, he had 0 sacks last year in 13 games, and that's his thing, pass rushing. And then they have Jalen Ferguson, who
I like Jalen though.
I haven't actually watched much tape on him, but I just think they're pretty weak.
I think it's funny because Terrell Suggs was the all-time sack leader in NCAA history, and he gets replaced by Jalen Ferguson, who broke his record for most all-time sacks in NCAA, but it was at Louisiana Tech. So you have to put a little bit of an asterisk there. But I do like Jalen Ferguson. They got him with crazy value. Shane Ray, Tyrus Bowser, whatever. Judon, all right. They just have a bunch of guys. This is not the same Baltimore defense that we have known for the last decade. It's not. They have transitioned from building the front 7. They had everybody leave. All of their linebacker core left last year, and now they're building through the secondary. So it's quite interesting how things have changed offensively and defensively, personnel-wise and schematic-wise, with Baltimore under the same coach, Harbaugh. Maybe he's adapting. We'll see how it plays out.
All right, so I can agree with that. So go ahead and pencil that in. Let's move on to the linebacking core. I'm going to pass this to you, Shaw. Who's the best linebacking core in the AFC North?
All right, the best linebacking core, since we're counting TJ Watt as a linebacker, I put as the Steelers.
Agree.
All right, so Devin Bush, I'm really excited about him. Ooh. I think he has a chance to be Defensive Rookie of the Year. Mm-hmm. His tape is just so exciting to watch. TJ Watt, 13 sacks last year. just super solid edge guy. He's all right in space. And then you got Vince Williams, who's actually when he was with Ryan Shazier, who is Devin Bush-esque. Vince Williams did really well. He's like a big thumper as opposed to Devin Bush, just sideline to sideline.
Yeah.
Other linebacker, Bud Dupree, who I as a Steelers fan, it's really hard to watch this guy play. He has about one pass rush move, and that's just run upfield and then just get taken outside by the tackle, and it's hard to watch.
It's a solid move, man. Let's be honest.
And just for the record, I think, and no disrespect to Ryan Shazier, but I think that Devin Bush has a higher ceiling than him, personally.
He's unbelievable, man. He is unbelievable. I am the biggest Devin Bush fan. A lot of people love Devin White, and I like Devin White as well, but in my rookie rankings before the draft, I actually had Bush ahead of Devin White. I had them both in my top 7 overall rankings, but Devin Bush that dude's special. He is special.
Yeah. So who do you have at 2? Who is the second best, Shaw? Who is the second best linebacking core?
After 1, it falls off
a
lot. Like these 3 teams might have like bottom 5 linebacking cores in the league, really.
Sure.
So I have 2. I have Browns. They have Christian Kirksey, who was injured half of the season. He's a solid player. They got Joe Schobert, who he's also solid. Actually, I really liked this pick of Mac Wilson. He fell to the 5th round, actually. I really love Alabama players. I think they're usually work out in the NFL, and he had a really poor combine, but if the Browns can turn him around, I think he'll be pretty solid.
All right, so I'm going to switch over. John, do you agree? And if you do, move on to 3 and 4.
Yeah, I do agree. Number 3 would be the Cincinnati Bengals for me. I think that they have a lot of young, high-end prospects. Malik Jefferson, they got out of Texas in the 2nd round last year. He didn't play that much last year, but he's going to have a shot to start. And then they go get Jermaine Pratt, who his film is a lot of fun. They've got a couple guys that have taken up a lot of snaps, Nick Virgil and Preston Brown, plus Hardy Nickerson. Just props to his dad. He's still representing his sons out there, so that's pretty cool. But I would put the Bengals 3rd just because the upside potential. They could be awful, but there's some draft capital that is represented there, and Malik Jefferson and Jermaine Pratt I think would be a good tandem.
And last place, finish this out.
Yeah, it's the Ravens. Anybody disagree here?
No, and there's not really anything on their depth chart. I mean, it's hard to look at, to be honest.
They lost 3 of their 4 starting linebackers in a 3-4, so it's going to be rough. And they didn't replace them with really anybody of high potential. Kenny Young, you got Patrick Onwuasu. There's not much there.
All right, so the thing that makes it difficult for the Ravens when we're talking about their linebacking core isn't just how young and inexperienced their linebacking core is, but I'm interested to see how that's going to impact the secondary. So, Shaw, as our guest, I want you to go ahead and tell us who you think the number 1 secondary is in the AFC North.
I have the number 1 by a lot, by a country mile, is the Baltimore Ravens. They actually have a really nice secondary. Earl Thomas, who, if he plays even like 90% of who he was like 2-3 years ago, will be excellent. Tony Jefferson, really underrated player last year. They have really good corner depth. They have Brandon Carr, Marlon Humphrey, who I think will be like a top 10, even top 5 corner this year. I'm really high on Marlon Humphrey. Tavon Young hasn't really produced, but he is a good young player. And they have Jimmy Smith, so I think it's a really good group.
Very good. I think that's consensus, right?
Yeah, for me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Who do you have at 2, Shaw?
2, I have the Bengals, actually. I have Jesse Bates, a really good player. He had 3 interceptions and 111 tackles with 21 passes defended. That is some good stats coming out of safety position.
Yeah.
Sean Williams, he actually had 5 interceptions and 110 tackles last year. So I don't know, maybe it's like their scheme, but their safeties, they're doing good out there. And their corners are solid. They have William Jackson III, solid guy. Drake Kirkpatrick, he was not anything flashy. Both of those corners are pretty similar in talent level, I would say. But the safeties are the reason they're second. Is that consensus?
Yeah, it is for me.
Yep, same. We are in agreement so far. Keep going, you sexy stud.
Yeah.
All right. 3, I have the Browns.
Look at you.
They have Demarius Randall, who actually had a decent year last year. Denzel Ward, who I think is a star in the making. His rookie year, he looked really, really good as a rookie. Greedy Williams, I'm not as high on him as other people are. I think there's a good reason he dropped in the draft. He's a corner who can't tackle, and I feel like that. Like, what is he going to do on a screen? That's just easy yards. I'm kind of worried about him, but he's a really good cover guy. And they have Morgan Burnett, who is trash. That's all I have to say about him.
And then, so obviously your 4 is
4th. It hurts me to put
I'm gonna
them
make
here,
you
but
say it.
the Steelers are 4th. They're last. They have Sean Davis, who really is nothing special. He had a solid rookie year, then really fell apart his sophomore year. Terrell Edmonds, who actually, when this pick happened, I was so mad. I turned off the draft. I just didn't want to. I didn't think this guy was that good coming out of Virginia Tech, but really he actually did okay last year. And I think if the Steelers develop secondary, if they somehow find a way to develop secondary players, they haven't so far, but he could be pretty good in the league. Joe Hayden, who is the best one on the team because he wasn't developed by the Steelers. That's why he's good. He was developed by the great team known as the Browns. He's definitely a top 20 corner in the league, in my opinion. He's a solid, really solid player. Doesn't do anything flashy, but rarely blows his assignment. Really just a solid corner. And corner 2 is, I don't know who it's going to be. It's either going to be Steven Nelson or Artie Burns. Really, they could put a paper mache person out there who would do about the same. So Steven Nelson, he's coming from the Chiefs, and the Chiefs they're world renowned for their great secondary performance. You know, their defense just really stout. No, the Chiefs are not known for any defense. The Steven Nelson last year, pretty horrid. He actually got benched a couple times last year.
I'll tell you this, Justin Lane, cornerback out of Michigan State, I think is a dark horse guy to win a starting spot there.
Yeah, go ahead, Charles.
I was going to say, and I would favor Artie Burns in that competition between him and Nelson. Go ahead.
Artie Burns, I'd love to see him play. His rookie year was really good. He had 3 interceptions. He was making a lot of plays, and he only played 8 games. I think he only started 4 games at the very last 4 games. So he had a good rookie year. His sophomore year was okay. It was kind of, sophomore slump. Then his last year was horrible. This was one of the most awful years. In 16 games played, he had 1 pass defended. He only touched the football in the air once. Artie Burns is maybe he figured it out this offseason. I hope he did, but I think he's a bust.
Well, that is a pretty rough statistic to face for sure. So we've beat up on your Steelers being last place. I think it's the only last place finish they have, but drum roll, please. John, do you have the numbers added?
I do.
And configured?
And they're surprising. I would not have guessed that they would turn out this way. So, again, what we do is kind of like a golf score where we just keep track of how many rankings for each position group, all 7, and then total the scores. Lower score, the better. Dead last, actually, with 22 points were the Ravens.
Wow.
I would not have expected them to finish behind the Bengals, but they did significantly. The Bengals finished 3rd place with 20, and they're interesting. They had 2 last-place finishes with quarterback and offensive line. Other than that, it was all 2s and 3s. And then the top 2 guys, if you had to guess, who do you think came out on top?
Is it close? Is it close?
It is close.
I would have to put the Steelers top just because
All right.
The implications.
So actually, Steelers came in second with 15 total points. That last place secondary Chuck was correct. That was their only one. And tops in the division is the Browns with 13 points, who never had a last place finish. They finished in the top 1, 2, or 3 with 3 first place finishes. So the order goes Browns 13, Steelers 15, Ravens 22, and Bengals 20. That is going to be the total numbers there. And also interesting of note, 13 that the Bears got is tied with the Rams in the NFC West as far as against their division. 1 behind the Eagles, who finished with 12. And then the Patriots also had 13 in the AFC East as well.
Browns are going to be a problem this year. Like they have the potential, and no offense to Shaw here, but they have the potential to starch the Steelers and the rest of their division. They just have that kind of talent. But I think
potential just means you haven't done it yet.
That's true. And I think the Steelers probably have a chance against them at home for sure. But it's going to be an interesting year, pulling on the Steelers to humble Baker a little bit. But before we go, all three of us have watched a documentary called All or Nothing. And basically what I want each of us to do before we sign off is kind of like, just give me your biggest takeaway from watching the Carolina Panthers. Because every time I watch Hard Knocks, every time I watch All or Nothing, I walk away with like, oh my gosh, like Jerry Jones is a cancer to the Cowboys, or this guy is a cancer to the locker room, or this team really doesn't take it that serious. You can tell there's a big difference between them and other real competitors. And I'm going to start with you, John. What was your biggest takeaway from All or Nothing?
I really like Ron Rivera.
Yeah.
I think that he's a hell of a coach. He allows his players to do their thing, and he allows his coaches to do their thing. The one thing that pissed me off the most was Dante Jackson, the stud cornerback out of LSU rookie.
Yeah.
Not being able to take any criticism from players or coaches whatsoever. He just seemed like, he seemed like a little bitch.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
His talent is unbelievable, and his speed is awesome, but you have to cap his potential just because you can't coach him. He's going to do whatever he wants to do, and that's what it is. Cam was Cam.
Right.
Absolute amazing smile. It makes everybody around him have a good time, and so I like Cam, which is interesting because Cam Newton was kicked off of the Florida Panthers when Aaron Hernandez was the team captain. So
Gators. To
say that he's gone that far from being a huge turd and taking money with Auburn, all that stuff, that's in the past. I root for the kid. I really, really do. I really do.
Shaw, what was your takeaway?
My biggest takeaway was Cam Newton's actually one hell of a leader. He was the heart and soul of that team. I knew when you're quarterback, you are obviously going to be kind of a leader already. But I really was impressed with his abilities. Another thing was, Ron Rivera was really perplexing for me. Because at one hand, I really liked, towards the end of the season, his, hands-on approach. He started calling the plays. He really just let his players have fun, as mentioned earlier by John. But also what I really didn't like was midway through the season, he fires the D-line coach, Brady Hoke, and the assistant secondary coach. That is just blaming people who aren't really responsible for the losses to put the responsibility away from you. Because really, the D-line coach and the assistant secondary coach, is firing them midseason going to make... Are you going to win the Super Bowl now? I do not think so. I think that was a pretty weak move by Ron Rivera.
And once you do that, you remove that buffer, you're putting yourself closer to the chopping block as well. Because when you do that and you take over play calling or whatever, there's no more fall guys.
Right.
It's coming. But I do like Ron Rivera. I will say the funniest part of the whole show was when Steve Smith, the old Panthers wide receiver, showed up and was talking to DJ Moore, rookie, and he asked him, should I start you in fantasy? You go out there and give me 2 points, I'm going to slap the shit out of you.
Yeah, that was
in the
hilarious.
middle of practice.
So I will say one of my takeaways was I didn't love the confidence from the wide receiving core.
No.
I didn't like the confidence from DJ Moore. Kind of scares me about him in Dynasty, to be perfectly honest. I didn't like the confidence and the mindset from Funchess. But really my biggest takeaway, while I agree with both of you, I think that the show made me a bigger fan of Cam. I was more impressed with his leadership than I thought I would be. However, ultimately, my biggest walkaway was I don't think he's focused enough to get them to the level that they need to be at. That's just my personal takeaway. Just comparing some of the other camps we've been able to peer into through other documentaries. Sometimes the fun in the games kind of seems to take over in some areas where he needs to dig in and he needs just to focus. Maybe that's what keeps him light and what keeps him going. That's fine. But in terms of the killer instinct, the guy who's going to, really explode when you need him to consistently, I didn't get that from him. And one of the lines in the documentary came out and said that Cam really feeds off of people fearing him. And when teams don't fear him enough, all of a sudden you see a quarterback who holds onto the ball a little too long, who doesn't read through his progressions. So ultimately I just thought to myself, what an awesome quarterback. I just wouldn't want him on my team. I wouldn't want him to lead the entire franchise. So freaking All or Nothing, by the way, amazing. But I cannot wait for Hard Knocks Raiders because it is going to be a shit show. Can't wait. I think that starts in like 2 weeks, I believe.
Yep.
Something like that. So
1 week after, so they're on a 1 week delay. So as soon as the first preseason game happens, that following week is when it will come out.
Yeah. Well, Shaw, thank you for being on NFL Express.
Choo choo.
Thank you for having me.
All right, boys. Peace.